There was once a woman who was very happy. She was absolutely perfect. Well, you know, she wasn't perfectly happy. She was happy. She travelled around Australia, looking at beautiful scenery, talking to interesting people, having fun adventures. But she could not be perfectly happy because, alas, she had no child. Oh, how she longed for a child to call her own, even a very little child. And as she wandered all over Australia, seeing the colours, the beauty, the interesting people, still she never forgot her longing. And worst of all was when she went to the Red Heart of Australia, for the Red Heart of Australia, Uluru, reminded her of her own heavy heart. And she wandered around looking, searching, longing for a child, even a very little child. But the time she went to Uluru was the time of the blooming of the deserts. And as she looked around at all those flowers, pink and purple, gold and white, she came upon one that was none of these colours. It was green, a flannel flower. And when she looked at the flannel flower and saw the stamens, all green and little, and the green petals rising on either side, she leaned forward to smell. And as she opened her eyes, she saw there a little child, no bigger than her thumb. And so she called her Thumbelina. And now she and Thumbelina were perfectly happy because they could continue to wander around the country, seeing beautiful scenery, meeting interesting people and having fun adventures together. And as they wandered and explored all around the country, they came at last back to the Red Heart of the country. And as Thumbelina was asleep in her tent, the tent was ripped open and a dingo seized hold of her and took her away. And her mother was left running after her, calling, "A dingo's took my baby!" Well, she ran and she ran and she ran, and you'd think her heart would not give out, but her breath did. And so she had to watch as the dingo took Thumbelina far away. And Thumbelina clung to the fur of the dingo as it went over the deserts and then further up into the hills, and it got cooler and colder. And she clung and stuck into the fur of the dingo. So cold, and she could see it slowing down and the water running past, the water of the Murrumbidgee. And she realised that if she slipped back further until she's hanging on to the edge of the tail of the dingo, swinging up and back and forth and swinging up and over and splash into the water of the Murrumbidgee as it swept up into the mountains until the river grows slow with the cold in the Victorian Alps. And Thumbelina swam with her tiny little hands onto the edge of the Murrumbidgee, and she climbed up through the snow, pulling past the snow, walking through it. And she was cold. How cold was she? Oh, so cold. And she was wet. How wet was she? And the hair hung down, straggled around her until at last she's walking and walking and just right down to the hole and the home and the shelter of something big and dark and hairy looming up above her. A hairy-nosed wombat. Now, she tried to speak through her chattering lips to explain what had happened in the whole adventure, but he's a hairy-nosed wombat. He can see, he's peering in the darkness and he can see her. She's wet, she's cold. Is she wet? Is she cold? Yes. So what does she need? She needs warmth, She needs shelter, and this hairy-nosed wombat, he's the one to give it to her. And so he welcomes her in, and he feeds her and shelters her and warms her, and together they are perfect, well, not happy precisely. Let's say Thumbelina was content. When she looked around, it wasn't the red heart or the blue waters that she was used to looking at. It was all dark. It was like Martin Place at peak hour, everybody in black, you know, it was just miserable. It was just wandering through. But he was kind to her. She had food, she had shelter, she had warmth, you know. Many a person would be happy with much less. And it wasn't as if they were lonely, because the wombat was friendly to others. He had other friends, many of them. But of course the one who came most often, the one who feels most comfortable in a hole in the ground, would be the echidna. And so they spent many a long hour together, content. And as the seasons wore on, Thumbelina grew bolder and would start to explore through the tunnels that the wombat had dug. And in the distance she saw a colour. It was bright, green and blue and red and gold. It was like the logo of the AFTS. And as she got closer, she saw, yes, it was a symbol of hope, like the logo of the AFTS. It was a symbol of beauty, like the logo of the AFTS. It was a symbol of the future, like the AFTS. It was, in fact, a rainbow lorikeet. It was a long time since she had seen anything so lovely. And she went there and she saw, he was cold. How cold? How wet? And she knew what it was from her still beating heart. She pulled him up and she warmed that rainbow lorikeet, tiny as she was, crawling through his feathers, warmed him and fed him little scraps of food and little drops of water. And as she shared kindness as kindness had been given to her, the rainbow lorikeet stretched and warmed and the feathers expanded so that rainbow filled the space of the tunnel. Well, not completely, because it couldn't quite reach out enough to fly. And Thumbelina with a new friend, a new hope for the future, returned to her friend the wombat with this news of the rainbow lorikeet and how could she set him free. But the wombat didn't have time to listen to her. No, he had other news, great news for her, because he had a way that she would never be lonely again. Gotcha, bloke. Gotcha. He's a good bloke too. And you know him? Echidna? Top. And well, the echidna, great mate, you know, good friend. But marriage is a rather more intimate relationship, something a little bit closer. And the relationship that one would wish to have an echidna is not necessarily an intimate one. But it's embarrassing in these sort of situations. If you've ever been set up, you know how embarrassing it can be. And she did the psychologically healthy thing by saying and then making herself completely unavailable. And so she went through the tunnel back to the rainbow lorikeet, who's looking fine now. He is absolutely ace. So she tells him his plan. He says, I've got a plan. I have a deep and cunning plan. We can get rid of this hole and we can set off to a place full of colour. And so she led him up through the tunnels, and from the darkness to the dimness, and from the dimness to the light. And up there, the sky was blue. And when the rainbow lorikeet saw it, he stretched his wings, and she clambered on his back, and he flew up and out across the mountains, across the hills, across the valleys and the rivers, until he came down round Sydney Harbour and landed in one of the most beautiful places in all of Sydney, the Royal Botanic Gardens. And there he came to land. And as he landed, she looked around and there were colours. There were flowers all around, blossoms of purple and gold and pink and white all around her along Spring Walk, which you should go and visit while you're in Sydney. And as she was going through, she lands and she looks around, and there are pearl white butterflies, and there are monarch butterflies, and there are bees and golden orb-weaver spiders, and there's other things flying towards her. A prince among fairies. Now, this close to Oxford Street, that might not seem a really positive mood on her place, but at least she's got a home, and you know, his colour. Actually, thinking about it, his dress sense, he's Prince of the Fairies, he's living near Oxford Street. This might not have been the best thing she could have thought of, but moving smoothly along, we're an inclusive society, she'll find a way. Families have many forms, right? Okay, so moving along, they have a wedding. It was fabulous, Tony. It was absolutely fabulous. Everybody came. The fairies came. She got a gift, the gift of wings, but on the guest list, down the bottom, came her mother. And from then on, she was perfectly happy. And they all lived happily ever after.